Crabbing from the shore or the jetty is inexpensive and super fun, and today I got just the 10 tips to help you catch more crabs from the shore or the jetty. What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel on the latest top 10 tips video today dedicated to shore crabbing and crabbing from the jetty. Now, unlike crabbing from a boat or a dock, jetty and shore crabbing give you a ton of different options, mobility, and it's inexpensive, and you get into some super cool remote areas that you can't otherwise crab whether you're in a boat or from the dock. Now, I love crabbing from the shore or the jetty because sometimes it can be really adventurous, it can be super dangerous, although you have to be really careful, but you can get in some really cool areas and catch a lot of big crabs. Now, before we get into the tips, let's talk about the main rod reel setup that you should have when you're out crabbing from the shore or from the jetty. Now, the main gear that I love to run shore crabbing is a 10-foot to 13-foot heavy stiff rod. And nowadays, companies like Okuma are making crab casting rods specifically. So when you get out on those jetties, you get onto the shore, you can cast that really heavy trap and get it out there super far with those heavy long rods. And when you're reeling them up, you need a heavy, very stiff rod to get that gear back to you. Now, typically what I've been running is a 10-foot Okuma heavy rod. This is a 15 to 40 rated 3/4 to 6 ounces. So it can take a lot of weight, and it can also cast a country mile wide. And then from a reel perspective, I pair this up with an Okuma Ignite 65. You can go anywhere from a 4,000 size reel to a 6,000 size reel. I always like going bigger because you're going to get more power and you're going to be able to get that heavier crab and the heavier traps back to you without getting snagged up. And then the size line I put on these things, I go anywhere from 65-pound braid all the way up to 80, even 100 pounds. Now, the two most common traps that you use when shore crabbing or crabbing from the jetty are snares, which are little boxes with rings on them. As you pull it in, it collapses and circles around the crab's legs and basically catches them in a loop where you can reel them in nice and easy. Now, the snares have a little open box that you can close. You can put lots of different baits in there, from chicken to squid to anchovy to shad, all different kinds of fishes, and they work awesome. Different sizes and different weights, and you can cast those things out a mile, especially on the sandy beaches. Those are the most perfect locations to fish with snares. The other trap that you can use are foldable crab traps. These are the Danielsons that I love to use the most when I'm shore crabbing along the Oregon coast. Now, the foldable crab traps are great because you attach it to this end here, and when they fold open like this, they lay flat on the bottom. You put your little bait in the middle here, the crabs come in, and then when you're ready to go and you pull it up, they just folds up and bam, the crabs get trapped in the middle. You just reel that sucker in, and sometimes I've seen people reel 3 keepers up in one collapsible trap. So now that we talked about the gear, let's talk about the 10 tips that are going to help you catch more crabs from the shore or the jetty. Now, we're going to start out with tip number 10, which is bringing multiple rods and multiple setups to cast out into the water. By bringing multiple rods and gear, it gives you a lot of different options and sets you up better for success. Firstly, you can toss out multiple different styles of baits. You can also toss out multiple different styles of traps between snares or collapsible traps, which allows you to see which one is doing better. Thirdly, if you happen to break a rod or snag up on something, you've got a backup rod. I've been out there before with just one rod, broken something or got snagged up, and if that rod or reel's out of commission, I'm SOL. So bring multiple rods. Now, fourthly, in the Northwest, and in Oregon where I live in particular, we can have up to 3 traps per crabbing license, which means I can have 3 different rods with 3 different setups and cast them out there at the same time. And so typically I'll either go 1 or 2 rods just because I don't get too crazy, but you can legally have multiple rods, and that gives you multiple baits in the water, multiple traps in the water, and multiple chances at those big Dungeness crab, red rock crabs, or whatever crabs you're going after. And of course, having multiple traps, the biggest thing is if you get stung up, you've got other gear that you can go back to because you're gonna lose gear. If you ain't fishing or crabbing, you ain't losing gear. Don't ask me how I know. Keep your drag tight. I swear, this happens to me all the time when I'm out salmon fishing or trout fishing or even bass fishing. But now, one thing in particular with shore crabbing or crabbing from the jetty, you need your drag to be tight, because if you have a loose drag, you're going to drag your baits on the bottom, you're going to get snagged up. You need a tight drag because you got a lot of weight you're bringing up, and you want to make sure you get it above the rocks and out of the snags. I've had too many instances, or I've seen too many people who get their bait set up, get their gear set up, they cast it out there, and lo and behold, told they forgot to check their drag. So when they're reeling in, oh crap, I gotta tighten my drag, and while they're messing with that, their stuff's sinking to the bottom, and guess what happens? They get snagged up because they're not paying attention. So before you even make or attempt that very first cast, tighten your drag, and if you think you're not tight enough, just crank it a little bit more. In my opinion, you can't have the drag so tight when reeling up crabs. I'd rather have an overly tight drag and get my gear up 99 out of 100 times than having it just a couple clicks loose and then end up losing my gear, bring it back in. So please, for my sake and for not losing more gear, check your drag. Coming in at tip number 8 is to use a longer rod. Now, typically in the salmon fishing world, we use anywhere between 9 to 11 foot rods, but when you're shore crabbing, you definitely want a longer rod because it'll allow you to cast out farther than a shorter rod, and you'll be able to get more leverage, especially as you pull back and reel that bait and those crabs in. It gives you more leverage and gives you a better angle to get those crabs out of the water without getting snagged. And as I said earlier, I like anywhere between a 10 to 13 foot rod, especially if you're crabbing along the jetties or the rocks. Having that longer rod to be able to cast down, you will be able to bomb those snares or those traps much farther out with a taller rod. And that's going to give you advantage because your bait's going to be a little bit farther out. It could be just in the right position. That extra 10 feet of cast may make the biggest difference. So when it comes to your fishing rods, get them longer and get them stiffer. Now, coming in at tip number 7, focus on the incoming tide. And this is typical no matter what type of crabbing that you're doing, but in particular from the shore or from the jetty, you're going to give yourself the best opportunity crabbing that incoming tide to get keeper crabs, whether it's Dungeness crabs, red rock crabs, stone crabs, whatever your crabs you're going after, you want to fish that incoming tide because in the bays or in near the jetties that you're crabbing, you're going to have the best opportunity when that incoming tide comes in. Now, that's not to say crabbing from the shore you won't catch them on the outgoing tide. I just feel it's going to be much tougher. The crabs are getting swept out back into the ocean. They're trying to follow that salt water out of the bay as that tide is going out, and they're less likely to be wanting to go feed during that time. They like to feed as they're coming in on the incoming tide. So if you have a time of day or you need to pick that time to go shore crabbing, get there about an hour before incoming tide, get set up, find your location, make sure you're safe and you get out there with no issues, make sure your gear's all ready to go, and then as the incoming tide is coming in, start making those casts and getting ready to reel up some big ones. Now, coming in at tip number 6 is to research locations, and this is mostly for those newer going out to shore crab or crabbing from the jetty. You want to do your research before going out there. Figure out where maybe the best location is, maybe the best beach, how to get there, where to park, how to be the safest to get out there, but also look around as you're maybe going to a place, see where everybody else is at, see where other people are crabbing, and that's okay to just do that visual research, but beforehand, before you even get out to the location, do a little research because with multiple different jetties, maybe one side of the jetty is better. Maybe you got to go way farther out on the jetty versus more in. With a long beach and a long shore crabbing opportunity, you could have different sections of the beach that crab very differently because the water, points, lots of rocks underneath, like there's could be so many different variables, and doing a little bit of research before you head out can make the biggest difference, especially as you're starting out. If you're a veteran, this is still a great way to research new locations and find new secluded off the grid spots where you're trying to find some more secluded areas to go crabbing. Now, coming in at number 5 is to make some moves. And what I mean by that is don't stay in one location. If you're not catching any crabs, if you're just getting a bunch of tiny ones, if they're all females, you might need to move around a little bit. Especially jetty crabbing or crabbing from the shore, you may have a section that is just not crabbable at the moment, or there's just not a lot of big keeper crabs there. So don't feel shy, don't feel afraid to move around and move different locations. So like when I go out shore crabbing, I have a couple spots that I pick that I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to crab here, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to move here, or I'm going to move here, right? If you got a lot of hours of incoming tide, maybe give it an hour, maybe give it a couple hours in a location. If it doesn't work, don't feel like you got to keep staying there, because if you keep reeling up nothing, if you keep reeling up small ones or females or non-keepers, don't be shy, don't be afraid to move locations. At times, I can get stuck in a rut where I just want to sit there and just crab from one location. If nothing's going on, why would I want to stay there? I should be moving around. Even like 100-yard difference of moving down the shore, up the shore, along the jetty could make the biggest difference. So don't feel shy and don't feel afraid to move around once you're out crabbing. Now coming in at tip number 4 is to be patient. Now at times you think that if there's no crabs there and you need to move around, if it's just slow crabbing day, some days you just gotta be patient. Let the bait soak in the water a little bit longer. Let your gear sit out there longer than you normally maybe would expect to. Analyzing what's going on in front of you, seeing how the water conditions are. How's the water moving? Are your baits getting nibbled at all? Looking at those little things, being patient. Slower days out short crabbing can be a challenge, but it could be you just need to wait an hour till the incoming tide, till there's more crabs around. As you're going through it, maybe it's a slow day, maybe you're not getting a lot of keepers, just keep grinding. Sometimes just being patient, keep at it. If it's a location you've been to before and got keepers, just be patient, because being patient sometimes is the best payoff. Now coming in at tip number 3 is to have a variety of baits, and this goes true for any type of crabbing, but in particular for short crabbing. Now with a snare and a foldable trap, you have multiple different options to throw out multiple different baits. We're talking chicken, squid, herring, anchovy, even shad, stinky fish. You've got so many different options and so many different baits that you can toss out there. Take advantage of that. And when crabs tend to feed, sometimes they pick different baits over others. Some are just more smelly and they'll go for those ones, but having a variety out there will give you the best shot at least catching 1, if not 2, 3, and more keeper crabs. If you're tossing the same bait out there and having a lot of success, great, keep at that. However, if you're not having any success and you're just using the same exact bait on all your traps, you probably should be changing it up. Outside of maybe changing location, the first thing I would do, especially if I know there's crabs around and this is a really crabby spot, change your baits out. Mix it up, mix halves and halves, take the stingers, take the foldable traps, just throw different stuff out there and see what's gonna stick or what the crabs maybe like more. And one pro tip, especially if you're handling bait, use some rubber gloves, because that you won't get your scent all over the bait, but also so then when you're driving home, you ain't getting that sticky stuff all over your steering wheel. Because when I go trout fishing, I already got enough glitter on my steering wheel. I don't need squid and anchovy and chicken juices all over my car. Now coming in at tip number 2, soak your traps 5 to 10 minutes, even sometimes up to 15 minutes. Here's why. Now normally when we're out boat crabbing or you're dock crabbing, you want to let your rings or your traps soak minimum of 20 minutes. Allow those crabs that opportunity to get in there. But with a smaller foldable trap or a snare, those crabs have a little bit easier time to get to that bait. It's a little bit more exposed and a little bit easier access for them. And it doesn't take a long time for crabs to find that isolated bait. Sometimes it can be 5 minutes, sometimes it can be 10 up to 15, depending on how the crabbing is going, how fast the crabs are getting there. I'll typically start where I'll cast it out, give about first round about 5 to 7 minutes, reel it in, see how many crabs I have, how much bait is taken from there, and then I'll typically maybe let it soak a little bit longer, maybe to 10 minutes. And again, with multiple traps and multiple rods, you can vary and stagger your soak time, which is great. You can maybe learn something different about how long it takes the crabs to show up there, and the longer you soak, potentially the longer you're gonna give yourself a chance to let those big keeper crabs come up and nab at that bait, and then you get a chance to reel them in. Now that we've gone through tips 10 through 2, well, what is tip number 1? Well, that is to take a friend crabbing with you. For me, crabbing is one of the best and easiest inexpensive outdoor activities to get into. If you got a long rod with a reel, a couple inexpensive traps, and some bait, crabbing licenses are only 10 bucks. Shore crabbing to me is an inexpensive way to get into the outdoors, to go harvest some very delicious seafood, and get you a chance to go explore different areas and take somebody else who maybe has never crabbed before and who loves to crab to get out and do something a little bit different than maybe boat crabbing or dock crabbing. Although be warned, make sure if you bring a friend that they actually buy their license as well. Don't ask me how I know that. And there you guys have it, the top 10 crabbing tips from the shore or at Jetty. I hope you guys learned something today. I hope you guys got some valuable information to take next time out with you in the outdoors. And until next time, guys, keep on crabbing.